Good evening. Welcome to the Arizona State University's Cronkite School of Mass Communications, the ASU California Center, the former Herald Examiner building. I'm Chris Woodyard. I'm the director for the Cronkite School here in Los Angeles. It's great to have you all here tonight for this fabulous Los Angeles Times Book Club event. We're doing some remarkable things here in this historic building. Let me just touch on those. We're doing this, ASU here in California, Arizona State, not something you would expect, but we have some, remarkable activities and things going on here that have really, we're hoping, liven up journalism and the things going on here. Let me give you a couple stats. We are trying to be as inclusive as possible. As of last year, nearly half of the incoming students at ASU were minorities. About 1 out of 3 of those undergrads were first-generation college students. And here in California, ASU has 52,000 alumni, 18,000 Californians seeking degrees, and 13% of the grads, ASU grads, are working here in California. We have transfer partnerships with 116 California community colleges. And besides Cronkite, we have a remarkable list of activities going on in this building. Everything from the Edson College of Nursing to the Sidney Poitier New American Film School to the Thunderbird School of Global Management. It's really remarkable if you get a chance to see this historic building, what's going on here. I'm a lifetime newspaper person. I was a Herald Examiner reporter here for 5 years in this amazing building, which at the time was completely beaten up, but full of all kinds of vigorous activity and a fun place to work. I was at the LA Times, and really, the transformation here has been unlike anything I've ever seen. It is the most advanced news organization building and really college satellite campus anywhere. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of background. We're going to have a really wonderful presentation from the Los Angeles Times Book Club, and off we go.
Good evening. I'm Donna Wares, editor of the LA Times Book Club. Welcome, everyone. I want to start off by thanking ASU for partnering with us this month. It makes it possible for us to present both a live book club evening here in person and for us to live stream it for our book club readers at home. We have, as you all know, this month we've all been reading and talking about California Soul by Los Angeles chef Keith Corbin. It's a raw and heartbreaking story about family, food, addiction, the gangster life, and the power of second chances. California Soul is the story behind one of LA's most celebrated chefs who landed in the kitchen after getting out of prison, not because of any great passion for cooking, but because he needed a job. He had to pay the bills. And it just happened that an innovative new restaurant just happened to be hiring in his old neighborhood. Tonight, Keith Corbin will be in conversation with my colleague, food editor Daniel Hernandez, and you're going to meet them in just a moment. But first, let's step inside the kitchen with Chef Keith.
Hi, Keith.
Hey, Lori.
How are you?
I'm good.
Welcome to the kitchen at the LA Times.
Thank you.
I have to say you are one of our first chefs who are breaking in the kitchen, so
Wow.
we're thrilled
That's a
to
big
have
honor.
you. Okay, what are we making, chef?
So we're gonna make our vegan gumbo, Alta's vegan gumbo. We'll start by breaking down the vegetables, the okra, the shallots. Then we'll saute those or sweat those with some West African palm oil, a little miso, some spices, chilies, garlic, ginger.
Fantastic. Let's see it. Time and love.
That's it.
Can you tell me about what might have clicked for you that made you think, I want to go on in this world, really become a chef?
It wasn't like I've never had that desire. I've just been a passenger on this ride. I was just coming home from prison. It wasn't about opening a restaurant. It wasn't about becoming a chef. It wasn't about standing here today. The journey just has taken me here.
I love how Alta makes it's so comfortable, and the food is just so beautiful. You have experience kind of trying to carve out great food in a food desert, as you say. Tell me about that experience.
There was a time where I was working in the various restaurants and I had ideas of what the food I grew up eating would be like if I had access to these resources that I was seeing other areas and cultures had access to. What would my granny food be like if we had a Whole Foods or a farmer's market or any of that? Just imagining the food that I grew up with fresher and better ingredients. I pitched that to Daniel and we worked on it together, and Alta is the birth of that.
You said you didn't set out to be a chef, but then look at what you're doing now. Do you think about that there must be other people who could do what you do, and are you?
Of course. It's all about giving chances and opportunity, because without that, I wouldn't be here. I didn't know how to use a knife. I'd probably mess up boiling water. But here I am, right? I wanted to quit many a times, and Daniel and the team wouldn't allow me to quit.
What's important to you when you plate a dish?
To be able to see all the components.
Look at that.
There you go.
That is gorgeous.
Thank you.
Man.
And now, please join me in welcoming Keith Corbin and Daniel Hernandez to the LA Times Book Club stage.
So I'm terrible with these.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, Keith. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Great to see you. And thank you for joining us all. Let's get right into it, man. This book is incredible. It, for someone, as we were just talking about, I was born the same year as you.
Same month.
Same month as
Yes.
well, we just figured out. And there was a period in California history that we have lived, and that I'm actually just, get emotional just thinking about it. That was this real moment of survival that people in our generation really went through. But I want to start at the beginning for you. And for me, I was really struck in reading California Soul, the influence that your grandmother had on you, Luella Henderson. And there she is pictured here. Tell us about her and the impact that she had on your life.
Man, that was a lovely woman. Um, Everything around me from early on just felt like a hopeless situation. My dad wasn't there. My mother was on drugs. Started off in her house in like this drug nest where, that's all it was until the house was raided, and I winded up down in my grandmother's house. And she was raising her kids, and she was older. And my grandmother she didn't have any successes to teach us about or any of that. The only thing she was able to do was love on us, right? And she did that through taking us in and through her cooking. Like, she fed us. And my grandmother spent so much time in the kitchen that if you wanted to spend time with her, it would be in the kitchen. You didn't bother her while she was watching her Westerns and smoking her cigarette. You didn't bother her during that time. But yeah, so my love for food started with spending time with my grandmother in the kitchen. Whether it was asking her for a piece of chicken and she's telling me to wait till she's done, and me sneaking a piece of chicken and putting it in my pocket and sliding behind her, or her putting the cake in her room and holding it till it was time to be eaten, and me slicing it because there was so many grandkids. I didn't think she was able to pinpoint it was me, but she always knew, But
She fed other kids in the neighborhood, right, in the Jordan Downs.
yeah, just throughout Watts, everyone. So my grandmother came from the South as a kid, about 10 years old. So she had that Southern roots and, upbringing, and her mother being from Alabama. So it was all about big cooks and feeding the block in the neighborhood, fish fries and just doing this big spread. So that's what she brought. Early on, while my granny was still able to move around, she had like a farm, had chickens and geese and rabbits, and we ate out the yard. So early on, I had this connection to farm to table, our yard to table. But as she got older and she was able to keep that up, is where, the food changed.
It's amazing. Your description of her is so vivid. And you also describe being in the projects, as you write here, is like a song. When you first hear it, you might pay attention to the lyrics or to the chorus or the bass line. But so much is going on, so much is happening, it's hard to isolate all the individual parts. Eventually, it's just music.
Yeah.
Your description of life in this case, the projects, but I feel like your description is indicative of a lot of like hood, barrio neighborhoods in urban California, in Los Angeles, in Southern California. And it struck me that I had never read someone describe so lovingly that kind of sort of like controlled chaos and improvisation. Tell us what it was like, your earliest memories of growing up in that community, and what people might not know about the beauty that is so often found there.
Well, it's different today, but when I was growing up, you had 711 units in the Jordan Down projects, right? Nobody doors was locked. And I'm talking about the 80s when things were rough, early 90s. But you were able to go in and out of anyone's house, right? And we fed each other. We grew up with each other. My mother was on drugs. I go pick up JT and have breakfast at his house. Could have been a syrup sandwich, mayonnaise sandwich, but we took care of each other, right? And we get out of school, we all run around playing ding dong ditch or cutting off the lights on the building and standing at the end and watch the people come out the house, looking around to figure out who it is. And it's about 20, 30 kids just running through the projects, raising ourselves, playing trash can basketball, throwing footballs, playing football in the fronts, watching the girls jump double dutch. You got the graffiti. Yeah, of course, you have your drug dealers and you have your drug users. And at the time, you had your hustlers and your gangsters. But everybody focused just on that part. But there's more to it. And that's why I'm saying in the book, like, you can't just pull apart whether it's the baseline, this, that, like, it all goes together. You know, don't pull it apart. Like we really had a life there.
It's remarkable, your descriptions, but as you write early on in the book, your life, takes a turn, and you experience a process that so many young men, again, of that period and of our generation suffered. You become submerged in the system, and you describe in very horrific detail, I would say, just how messed up the LA County Jail is, and it's right here, right up the street.
Don't remind me.
And it's a horrible place. And our journalists at the LA Times have detailed this, and there are lawsuits up and down over. I'm trying to reform LA County Jail, and you write, and it broke my heart, honestly, when you were going through the process of going to court in Compton, right?
Yes.
And a couple of instances, doing the 110, the 110 to the 105.
I could see my house.
That. Tell me about that. Tell us about
There was times I was going to court. So first, the way they set it up is, for one, we can't post bail. Like, I wasn't in a position to post bail. And fighting a case costs the state money. So they have this method where they will put you on dry runs. And what dry runs are is they will wake you up at 3 a.m. and send you through this court process, only to get to court and be there all day to the last bus, which is about 6 o'clock p.m., and come in and tell you you wasn't on the list and send you back to county jail. You've missed dinner, so you got to get a sack lunch, peanut butter and jelly, right? And you do it again the next day and the next day, and they tire you out and break you down, break your spirit, your will, to where you say, fuck it. Just give me what you got. I'd rather go to the state where I can get comfortable and get it over with.
And a couple times you write about being able to literally see your own mother,
My mother.
in the backyard from the bus transporting you.
Going to court, there's a couple of times going to Compton Court or Long Beach Court where on the 105, my mother stayed right off the 105 by the Imperial Courts. She was able to buy a house. And there's times where I'll pass by and see her out there watering her grass, right? And that used to break me, Like, could you imagine seeing your home that close, but not sure if you're gonna ever be able to walk through that door again? Like, it was terrible.
And there's all kinds of indignities that are normalized in this system, and often they can just like lead you in deeper, right? You have a run-in you describe with a guard, and that had a direct impact on where you eventually went to serve your sentence. Tell us a little bit about that.
No one's governing those COs or those guards in prison. They're their own gang, right? It's inmates versus the guards, or guards versus the inmates, right? Like, they literally, you can go in there and be falsely accused. They still gonna treat you the same, right? You can go in there as prey or as a kid who was raised right and just mistaken identity, and until they figure out it was mistaken identity, your whole life and world can change. And you can come home predator, the aggressor, because of your experience in there, right? No one's governing the guards in there. Like, there was a time where I was in LA in Wayside, and it was too far from my family. So yeah, I told them that I was sick and I needed to get back to the county jail. And he figured I was bullshitting. And he was upset that he had to take me. So he handcuffed me to the back and threw me up on the bench. But the people next to me were handcuffed to the front. So I asked him, why can't I be handcuffed to the front like everyone else? And it was one of those, just sit down and shut up. So when he left, I took my hands under my legs and put them in front of me.
It was uncomfortable to be.
Because it was
like this
uncomfortable with me leaning up against it for however long. And it's a slow process in there. It's a hurry up and wait. And he charged me for attempted escape. So when I got to prison, where I was supposed to just do minimum security prison. It sent me to a maximum level 4 prison for that strike of a pen. For that write-up, it sent me, 21 years old, to a maximum security prison with lifers to do 7 years. And it changed my life.
And once you're there, the reality gets even deeper and crazier. We hear a lot about the racial segregation that exists inside the California State Penitentiary system, but it is, in a way, its own method of survival, right? Tell us how you approach that and how you figured out how to survive in this extremely violent system.
I don't know, I just took it. I was 21, so I was careless. But as far as the segregation, it's encouraged by the system to segregate. You go in and they ask you what race you run with. They ask you your nationality. You know, who do you prefer to cell up with? You tell them anyone. They'll ask you again. And they'll ask you again until you get it. And you're like, oh, yeah, well, I want to cell up with blacks. So they encourage the separation. They fences us in and separate us, right? By law, they're not supposed to segregate inmates, right? But they encourage it, you know?
And of course, there's this whole other kind of hierarchy and kind of social structure that exists and evolves. And for you, you found an outlet in that you were able to get a job inside the kitchen.
Yes.
And even that has to be sort of like racially parceled so that it's balanced, right? As you describe in the book. And at the same time, people are also cooking things in their cells and kind of on their own. And I remember reading just over and over, it was just a sentence in the book here about how you've watched in amazement as you learned people were making tamales out of Fritos, for example, crushing down chips to make tamales.
And crushing down Cheez-Its and putting hot water on it to make cheese sauce and doing things like that. And it's the ingenuity. Like, there's great minds in there.
Right.
But, you know, it's no surprise. We're doing that before we even get to prison. Like, I was doing that growing up. My grandmother made dinner. She didn't make breakfast and lunch. So you have to take what's in the house and figure it out. So we just, you know, when we got to prison, we did the same thing. We just had that creativity and ingenuity. But there's people in there that takes it to another level. Like the way they think, taking their bunk and scraping the paint off and taking their blanket and rolling it up and putting it in a milk carton and lighting it on fire to put a fire under the bunk to make a griddle.
Inside the cell.
In the cell, yeah. They'll take their hot pot and take the thermostat off to make a hot pot, or turn it into a fryer and get a big can and add oil and turn it into a deep fryer. Yeah.
And yet you don't consider that experience for you the start of your cooking career.
It wasn't the start of my cooking career. That was just another level of my creativity and ingenuity and figuring it out, right? And a situation where I didn't have much to work with.
So you're in the system, and the streets are still running out here, right? And you get some horrible news, Keith. And as I'm reading the book, I keep thinking, man, how so much terrible shit is happening to you, and you have to still respond to it in a certain way politically, right? Not overreacting, because there are, as you describe in the book, other inmates who represent fundamentally rivals on the streets.
Yes.
And if you were to retaliate inside, obviously you would have gotten an extension or another charge at that point.
It's bigger than an extension. Again, the system doesn't govern the inmates. Like, we set the tone, we set the discipline. They just there. Like, the system is not set up to help you in no way, right? The whole way it's set up, we set it up. And one of the most important things that you learn when you hit prison is that whatever's going on the streets stays on the streets, right? So whatever your beef is on the streets is on the streets. When you come in here, there's things already going on. It's economic going on, right? I was on a level 4 with lifers. So I would be a damn, fool to come in there with 7 years and think I'm supposed to disrupt their livelihood and make it out of there, right? There's rules and regulations, and you don't bring your beef from the streets to prison. You know what I mean? Like, so there was an incident where I lost my cousin Brandon, you know, and I also had my brother Kevin shot. But when I lost Brandon, that was like big. And my closest allies on the yard, their gang was responsible for me feeling that loss, you know? So when I'm coming out the building, my closest friend on the yard was the one that told me that his homies on the streets were responsible for my cousin's death. And it really tested our relationship, right? It really
How did you handle that?
For one, I didn't have a choice. My family knew how I was at that time. So they called the prison and requested that they QT me, confine me to my quarters.
So your own family
Called
calls
to
the
the
prison
prison.
and requests confinement for you.
Request confinement, and they locked me down for 2 weeks. But over that 2 weeks, my friend QT, he came by every day to check on me, to feed me, right? To show me in a way that whatever's going on is not interfering with our relationship. And by him doing that, things began to subside inside me, you know? And so when I got released from the cell, we wind up having a racial riot on the yard, and QT stood beside me in that riot. So when we wind up going to the next yard, this is where it was really tested. One of his friends, one of his homies, and one of my homies got into it on a basketball court. And his homie got jumped. So now all these emotions from both sides are stirring back up. And I had a conversation with QT and was like, how's this gonna play out? And he was telling me from his side, they was ready to go to war. And I had to tell him, like, damn, I hate it had to come to this with you being on the other side of the line in the sand. But if that's what it's gonna be, that's what it's gonna be. But him and I continued to talk, and we were able to work with the guards to set up individual fights, isolated, controlled fights, to let the youngsters get out their anger and emotion without actually blowing up the yard, right? And QT had life without parole. I meet with him every Tuesday right now on the streets. Wow. So our relationship, even with this war going on with our neighborhoods, him and I still meet.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So you make it out, but the system is still testing you, right? Tell us.
The system designed to test me.
Yeah.
Like, is that new?
Right.
Like, I come home from prison, you talking about when I got fired?
Right.
Yeah, the system's not forgiving. Society's not forgiving. You come home from prison, you're placed on parole. Parole is asking you, in order to get off parole, you need to find a place to stay and get a job. But then the job is doing background checks, and if you've been formerly incarcerated, you're not being hired. So now you're stuck on parole. You gotta feed your family. You dive back into the underground economics. Guess what that do? That sends you back to prison. So it's set up that way. You know, this thing about rehabilitation doesn't exist. I don't even know why they talk about it. Because you're going to convince me that you're putting money in prisons to rehabilitate me after I go to prison. Why excuse me. Like, because why you don't do it prior to prison? Why isn't nothing going into my community prior to I go to prison to prevent that? Why put the money in prison? It doesn't make sense. So that tells me there's no money going into prison. But I was there to witness that there's no rehabilitation in prison and there's no rehabilitation in society, right? You have to go through something in life to change your mindset, to have an epiphany, right? Or you have to have someone believe in you and give you an opportunity and support you in that. You know, if you want crime to stop, then get rid of poverty. Because as long as there's poverty, people are going to find a way to
Try to come out of it, right?
Well, not even just come out of it, but self-preservation.
Right.
You got to feed your family. If you're not going to give me a job, then I'm going to go sell dope.
Right.
Right? And if I can't sell dope, I'm a jack. People ask me right now, if I lost everything and had to go back to the projects, what would I do? I'm going to survive. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do.
And what anyone would do, really. It's so fascinating reading that there's these chance encounters or chance moments that really do shape your life. And, you know, it's a reminder that that's often how all our lives are shaped. One day your mom is driving past what was your actually former T-shirt shop.
Yes.
Right? And she says, look, there's a restaurant opening. There's a hiring sign. Go in there and get a job, right? And
Yes.
this is how you walked into what would become local.
So
right?
I got a job when I came home from prison at the oil refinery and worked my butt off. And that they recognized my work. They acknowledged my work. They appreciated my work. They gave me a promotion. At the time they gave me the promotion, the company had just started doing background checks. Had I not got the promotion, I was retroactive. I was fine, right? But now that I had promotion, they had to run my background, my license, for me to drive company equipment and cars. So I was exposed. They discovered I had a felony. They terminated me, walked me right to the gate, and fired me right there on the spot. They didn't acknowledge the hard work. They didn't acknowledge that they were promoting me. They didn't look past my background, even though they seen my work ethic. They let me go. So about 2 weeks, I'm struggling, trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. And it was getting to the point where I just felt like the streets was the only path for me, right? But my mother called me, Saving Grace. She called me at the right time and was like, boy, get over here. They just built this restaurant and they're hiring on the spot. And I drove over there. I had just got off the freeway in Watts. So I drove over there, filled out the application, and got the job. And got the job as a line cook. And they called me the next night. It was like, we have a kitchen management position open. Do you mind taking that? And I said, yeah. And it felt better because I was getting back closer to the amount of money I was making at the oil refinery. So it felt good. But I didn't treasure that job or that opportunity because I didn't see where that opportunity can take me. There was no representation nowhere in my life that I can look to and inspire, right, to be that. So it was just another job for me.
But you were in the kitchen right away, right? I mean, this is the restaurant concept by Daniel Patterson and Roy Choi was about challenging all of the structures really in the restaurant industry and challenging and trying to find a way to combat this notion of food deserts, giving affordable food, high quality food in areas that is systematically underserved. And they must have seen something in you to
Or they was crazy.
Keep encouraging you, right? What was that initial kind of run like for you at Local?
I don't know. I worked closer with Daniel. because he was in the kitchen and Roy was more on the branding side. Daniel and I, we had our run-ins, and I just couldn't take it. So I tried to quit a couple of times.
And he would not let you quit, right?
You couldn't stop me, right? I think a part of me wanted to keep working too, because I did have desire at the time to like do something different. That's why I was even seeking jobs out in the first place and trying to work, because I just was over the streets. But he kept encouraging me. But one of the great things that Daniel and Roy did is they brought in a counselor and to meet with the staff and the team once a week, because they knew they were coming into a community full of trauma. And so in one of the group sessions, we were having conversations and discussions, and Daniel spoke about his past. And when he spoke, I was looking, and it felt like I was talking, because some of the things that he experienced as a youth in his house and in his community, I experienced. So we kind of bonded on that, right? It kind of helped me see him different, because at first it was just some rich white man coming here for whatever savior reasons or whatever. I didn't trust it, but we bonded around that.
And it was really the talk of the town. People from all over the world were coming to this restaurant in Watts. It made all these lists. Jonathan Gold named it Restaurant of the Year.
Restaurant of the Year.
In the first year that
we still have the bowl. We eat cereal out of it.
There you go. Amazing. But you're also very stark in your assessment of like what happened. That really it was a restaurant that was kind of plopped into a corner that was still a PCP drug running corner, and that it was going to be difficult for...
I don't think the PCP corner had anything to do with it.
Okay.
So Loco being on that corner kind of like made some PCP dealers upset.
Right.
Because you can't sell with all that attention. So it kind of cleaned up the block. But the way Watts is, and like many communities, but particularly that one, you have 4 big projects. So Watts is divided up in quads. So for example, if you have, let's say 40,000 people in Watts and it's 2.5 square miles, if you have 40,000 people and you split that down to 4, that's 10,000 per side. I had to check my math, sorry. That's 10,000 per section. And then if you take into account how many of them are kids, how many of them are drug users, how many of them are on fixed income, what's left, who's left to support a new restaurant? And then out of those who may have the finances to support it, who's going to spend their last or spend their money trying something new when you have Burger King and McDonald's and things like that that's familiar to them, right? So in that case, Loco wasn't set up for success, right? The proper homework wasn't done. But to call Loco a failure is a flat out, it's blasphemy. Because if Loco failed, then what am I doing here?
Right.
Right? Through Loco and that opportunity at Loco is how we're having this conversation.
And what was that menu like? There was something that you write about called a foldy. I never ate at Local, I'm sorry to say, but I was like, what is a foldy? Is that like a taco? Like what?
The foldy was one of Roy's things. So yes, it was a taco griddled, full of cheese and refried beans, and he wanted it griddled till the cheese was oozing out and got that good caramelization and crunch on it. So it was like street food. The foldy was like a street taco, like not a real street taco, but like, late night taco type thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And in that period as well, after Local closes, or I'm not sure if after, but at a certain point, Daniel Patterson is saying, well, come up to the Bay Area, come up to Oakland, and, work in the kitchen at his fine dining restaurants that were up there.
Well, I went up to the Bay Area to oversee the expansion and opening of Loco. So I wound up getting a director of operation roles.
Right.
And the company was based in the Bay Area, and the next expansion would be in the Bay Area. So the company moved me up there, to help with that. And while I was there and having free time, I was able to venture off in Daniel's various different restaurants. And then at one point when Loco closed, then I went into his own company and was able to work in the 4 or 5 restaurants that he had up there. And it gave me an opportunity to work with different chefs and see different things.
That's incredible experience at like the highest level,
Yeah.
you know, in the state of California.
But I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying.
you write about going to the farmer's market right there in San Francisco.
The farmer's market at 37 years old.
Right.
The first time I ever seen a farmer's market or Whole Foods, I was 37 years old. In a whole nother city.
And
Thanks, LA.
that's actually is a pretty strong indictment about
Yeah.
access to those kinds of
Yes.
experiences in Los Angeles.
Well, South Central. Los Angeles probably have access to that, but South Central, Watts, we don't.
And you write another line that I found myself thinking about it for days, that when you first get there, literally, it's like you felt kind of free because it's a different place. Like you don't have the boundaries and the borders that are invisible to most of us related to your life on the streets here, but you go directly to the projects in Oakland because you wanted to feel something familiar, right?
Wherever I go out of state, the first place I connect with, even if I don't talk to nobody, is the projects. That's what I know. That's home base for me. Like, as weird as it sounds, I was in Oakland, a place where, in Oakland's, you know, it has its stories.
Yeah.
But in a place where it didn't apply to me, and I could have went anywhere, but my gravitation was right back to what I knew, right? And that was the projects. But once I got that out my system, you know, and I was able to explore Oakland, like I found myself walking to the store with flip-flops on, and you know,
it's something that you would not do here.
No,
in LNY.
Not at all. Like the South, like in Southern California, the prison culture influenced the street culture and vice versa so much that you don't even go outside in flip-flops because everyone has been to prison. And one of the things in prison is you don't come out your cell with flip-flops on. You have to stay ready for battle. So walking out your house, even on the streets with flip-flops, to go to your car to grab something out real fast, somebody will check you on that. So to be able to do that in Oakland and have no one check me, right? And run and go to the store and walk through this, like, it was a relief. It was like a release of pressure.
The threat of violence is really everywhere. It's really harrowing reading this, I gotta say. And there are many books in California literary history that talk about gang life and gang culture. I'm thinking about Always Running by Luis J. Rodriguez. I think this book will be canonical next to it. Let me be the first to say it. Some terrible things happen to you even then, even as you're working and emerging as a chef. How were you able to become Chef Keith Corbin, and and segue us please into the foundation of Alta, Adams?
I don't know who is Chef Keith Corbin. I'm just me. I think that once I got noticed around my story, then being able to have that platform and then become that representation that I didn't have for people in my community, or that's even in the struggle, right? You don't even have to be from Watts. Like, for someone that's dealing with drug addiction, for someone that's dealing with incarceration, for someone that's coming home from prison, shit, for someone who just want to work, right? I think every day I just want to be that representation, you know, be that path, that blueprint that they can see. And that's why I'm so open and candid about my story, because it's like, yeah, I'm here, but I started from there. And like, you can see that success is possible, if we can call it success, right?
And would it be fair to say that Daniel Patterson gave you many, many chances? That there were times when...
Yes, but life has given me many, many chances, right?
And in one of those moments where you think, man, one day for my 40th birthday, right, you want to have a restaurant, and you want to maybe...
Throw my 40th birthday party in it.
Right.
You know, there was moments where we were opening a restaurant in the Bay Area named the Alta, and Daniel and I used to go to the farmer's market a lot. And we spent a lot of time together, you know, and cooking in his house and things like that. And through the exposure that he was like giving me, I started to think about like, damn, I wonder what our food would be like, or what my grandmother, what she could have created with these things that I now have access to that we didn't have access to. So I started to dream up this idea, and then seeing these techniques and all these things in the kitchen, just seeing it, but not knowing what they were doing, but seeing what the result was. You know, like a pave or a gratin, you know, seeing what they're doing with potatoes, and it's like, okay, what if I do that to our yams? You know, we did a special dinner, and we did a stuffed kale, and it's like, wow, what if we did that with the collard greens, you know, for presentation? So I was, you know, constantly bringing this idea to Daniel, but I'm like at the time I was like a guy who had a dream of building a house, but had no architectural or construction experience. And Daniel had that architectural and constructional experience. So when I'm given this vision, he was able to compute on how we can execute it. And then that's when I started to really learn how to cook.
Well, I feel like you can feel it right away when you walk into Alta. I remember I walked literally off the street. I usually would go to Delicious Pizza, you know, 2 doors down. And then one day I was
Shout out Delicious Pizza.
I was like, what's that, you know? I walk in, I sit down, I have a meal, sit at the bar, and I taste, obviously I had the fried chicken, I had the oxtail, the deviled eggs are incredible.
We're going to name the fried chicken Bill Addison's fried chicken.
Bill Addison's fried chicken, thank you, shout out to Bill. It feels, for anyone who in the audience who's been to this restaurant, like it feels very egalitarian. It feels kind of like everyone is involved.
In the back, I asked you, what does that mean?
Yes. In the sense that everyone is respected and feels that there's an input sort of like up and down, right? And it isn't a vertical kind of mindset. Tell us about Alta for someone who hasn't been there. What is the experience of dining at Alta?
I mean, at any given time, Alta has people of all ages, of all races, of all cultures, of all classes, right? And they're just having a good time, socializing, networking, enjoying great food. I hope that they believe the food is great. I always look at it as if you want a great example of what America could look like, come to Alta, right? You have white, black, rich, poor, ghetto, West Side, Westwood, Beverly Hills. Everybody in there having a good time, listening to great music, right? Just vibing.
And there was a bit of a setback in the sense in your relationship with Patterson, where initially you were going to be, you know, a part owner, and and then it doesn't happen right when you expected that it would.
Of course, yeah.
And at the same time, we're confronting questions about gentrification of West Adams. You know, people were trying to interrogate, is this restaurant black owned or not?
Yeah.
Tell us where things are now with Alta Adams.
Well, we ain't gonna fly by that.
Okay.
So when we got ready, when we started developing Alta, Daniel and I had a conversation, and and we discussed the ownership and the percentage and things like that. And when it came time to open, things changed, right? And powers that be, partners, investors, whatever the case may be, I wasn't really trying to hear it. I didn't understand it. I want what I wanted, So we're kind of.
It's been really disappointing.
It
for
was.
you.
It definitely was disappointing, but it wasn't deserving either, right? I just is like, I was more so on a person's word, and instead of me doing the work and then earning it or proving I deserve it, I started sabotaging it, And over time, again, putting up with me, giving me chances, whatever. But today, I own it.
Good for you.
Today, I own it. And Daniel, I had a drug addiction.
You
right?
write about it.
I had a drug
vividly.
addiction during the time for Loco, my entire life, up until 2.5 years ago. I had a drug addiction. So I wasn't even in the right space to own a business or any of that. But however, when I got my life together, when I went to rehab and got my shit together and got focused and started taking it seriously and came back after the pandemic and showed my worth, then the pieces started moving in my direction and the ownership came, right?
Yeah.
And I always wonder, like, did I waste a couple of years being like throwing temper tantrums when I could have just did that in the beginning? But I wasn't in the right state of mind. I wasn't even ready to receive that or any of this, So I thank God I went and got myself together.
It's an incredible story, and it really is, the way you lost your father, Keith. I don't know if you want to address it, but also just shocking to read on the page. And I think the city of LA is so very proud of you, and hopefully people at large will be. California Soul is out. Tell us what you want readers. You mentioned you have children, obviously. Your eldest is, you told me, 24 years old.
Yes.
You have a daughter who's, you said, 19. Have they read it? What have their responses been?
So my 19-year-old daughter read it, and my 22-year-old stepdaughter has read it. Okay. My son is in Texas. I don't know if he had a chance to read it yet.
I see.
But they've read it, and what they say, wow, we've learned a lot. Was kind of both their response separately. It was like, wow, we learned a lot. And like, my life was so private in the streets that my daughter that's 19, I lost my brother Truett when I was 14. And I didn't realize that my daughter never knew that I lost a brother. That's how I kept things filed away and didn't deal with it or process it. She learned about losing an uncle reading my book. Mm-hmm. It was like, wow, who is this uncle? Like, can I see a picture? Like, seriously. So, like, they learned a lot about what I went through.
In my own writing, sometimes I say, I'm writing to, like, young me, or I'm writing to, like, a 17-year-old me. What do you want a young person, let's say, or someone who's coming up in the streets now to take away from your book if they were to ever come across it? And what do you think the message that is contained here is?
I really believe the book is just for everyone. If you are dealing with, like I started, if you're dealing with drug abuse, right, you can relate to it, right? If you're dealing with incarceration, you can relate to it. If you're in an impoverished community, you can relate to it, right? if you want to change your life and know what that struggle is like, you can relate to it. Like, we have the nuances, we have that in there for you. And if, like, I met 2 people that has read the book. One is an older white guy who's a director or engineer. Wife runs a business. Son, you know, didn't have no ties to the streets, but for whatever reason, winded up in LA County Jail. Come home, and he's changed. But he don't know how to express to them what he went through, so they don't know how to help him. So through my story, they learned what he went through, or what he could have possibly went through in LA County Jail, and it gave them an idea of how they could start to help and heal their son, right? Through reading the book. Another woman who's a psychiatrist, professional, kid, went to jail, went to prison, came home, and was ashamed of her child going to prison, right? And kept it on the hush. And through my openness about my life and where I'm at, she now believes that her son still have a chance. So this story is for everyone. And for those out there that has this misconception about rehabilitation or what the prison system is like, God damn it, I'm educating them. Yeah. like we're gonna clear that up.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is my last question real quick. I definitely want to ask this because we talked about this in the green room. How do you deal with like the process of revealing, this is nonfiction, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there are people who are still alive who are mentioned here. What was the I imagine the delicate dance that you had to do in order to accurately reflect your story but still sort of honor certain boundaries, let's say, or codes?
So when I was writing it, when I was speaking it, right? Because I was sit on the phone 2 to 3 nights a week with my co-writer Kevin Alexander, and we would record. And we got to some stories and got to some stuff, and like it even made his ass feel uncomfortable. Where it's like, maybe you want to let some people or find out, is it okay? And so when it got to certain things, I would send part of the story out.
You would.
To my community and to people that's still in the struggle, right? Because for one, I wanted to be as raw and as open and transparent as possible. But I didn't want to blow up no one's world, right? People are still using the underground economy and economics as a source of survival. And it's not my place to destroy that for them, right? But then I also wanted to really educate people on what that life is like. So I would send part of the story out and have people read it and be like, thumbs up, am I going too far? Like, are y'all comfortable? Because the last thing I wanted to do was put the book out and make enemies.
Right.
You know?
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Keith Corbin. Thank you for this conversation. And now I'd like to invite my colleague, Lori Ochoa, to the stage, who's going to read a selection who you saw earlier, and then we'll do some questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, Keith.
Hey.
How are you doing?
He made me cut my finger.
That's right. That's right. Keith was in the Times Test kitchen, and we made him talk and cook at the same time. But he's actually fantastic at it. One of the privileges of watching you cook was seeing your chef intelligence, and the book, you know, talks about the life, a lot of the violence and the addiction, but also you coming out of it. But what I got to see is the chef you are today, and it was a great honor to see that. Keith made a couple dishes in the kitchen, including a vegan California gumbo, which you think, well, vegan, that doesn't sound like soul food, but when you look at the title of this book, California Soul, what you do is California soul cuisine.
Yeah.
And
But real quick,
yes,
like
yeah.
when you think of soul food, you think about the original creators or who's given credit, which is my enslaved ancestors. But prior to being brought here, they ate what they grew, right? It was vegetable and rice driven. So it was it was vegan already. Meat was an option. Like, but it was like they ate vegan.
Yeah.
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 Vegetarian.
And this dish is
One
so
of 'em.
smart. I mean, one we should say that it's spelled gombo, Gombo, which is closer to the West African spelling of okra.
Yes.
And you use red miso paste instead of a roux.
Yes.
In it, and it's just one of the smartest dishes I've ever had, where it's just layered with all kinds of flavors. This beautifully complex vegetable stock that you do. I made some at home, and it's fantastic. And then there's the gombo stew itself.
Yes.
And then, Keith went to the farmer's market that day and got, some radish sprouts and baby corn and broccoli and peppers and, sauteed them. But I love that you say you can use whatever is in season.
Yes.
You can cook it however you want. You can char it or...
So you can take your vegetables of your choice, right? And you can cook each vegetable differently if you want to bring complexity to the dish. Like if you want to char or roast the peppers, if you want to blanch your greens, if you want to pan sear or saute your your squash, or right, you can actually bring some complexity to that gumbo by what you do with your vegetables.
Right.
Yeah.
So on this day, he sauteed these vegetables. He put them on top of the stew, which was was also on top of a layer of brown rice.
Yes. California brown rice.
California brown rice. Then you put the sprouts on top, and it just had these beautiful layers on this dish. It was just really showed what you can do. I was loving that. So Donna Wares asked me to read a passage, and I chose this one because it's kind of transition period of you at Alta. You're not quite where you want to be yet. You're struggling a bit with your addiction, but then there's some things that happen that I'll read from
I'm
this.
curious. Suspense.
As I struggled to hold it together, the restaurant kept getting busier. When we opened, my skills were still developing. It was a tough situation. I couldn't learn how to truly run a kitchen yet because I was still stuck on perfecting basic shit like knife skills, setting up a station, showing up on time. The trained chefs Daniel brought in to help weren't always that helpful. I could see that they didn't really care the way that I did, that they thought the food wasn't as challenging or important as the fancy shit they usually made. It pissed me off, and Daniel too. He came to cover my days off every week, and every week he'd have to fix their mistakes. He wasn't hard on them like he was on me, though. He was trying to train me on cleaning and organizing walk-ins, ordering prep sheets, how to wrap herbs in damp towels and cover the greens so they didn't dry out, making sure that the meat order wasn't screwing us over on pricing, or that the dishwasher remembered to clear the bathrooms before service. It was frustrating because he was always on my ass. You gotta learn the basics to be a good chef, he would always say. And though I knew he was right, I really hated him telling me how to do that all the time. One
Still
day,
do.
what did he say?
Still do.
Still do. Yeah. One day, Daniel brought in his water stone and showed me how to sharpen knives. Soak the stone first, then draw the knife across the stone at the right angle, scraping tiny bits of stone into a paste, which helped with the sharpening. I had a reference point.
I had a reference point.
This sounds exactly like someone sharpening a shank on the concrete floor in prison, I told him. When you heard that, that sound at night, you knew shit was going down the
In the
next
morning.
day.
Yes.
No matter how hard my schooling in the kitchen was, I still found joy in cooking for people. When the dining room was packed and the music was bumping, Alta was magic. I loved the dining counter next to the open kitchen where people would sit and watch us cook. Every night, it was like we were on stage. Sometimes we fired an extra dish by mistake. I'd give it to someone sitting there, just like when I was on the line in prison kitchen. We got a lot of first dates, and I could always tell when it wasn't going well. So I'd try to crack jokes and make them smile to break the ice. I think it helped me a lot in relationships that way, but they weren't the only ones. That dining counter changed my life. It's how I met Renee. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of this because you have to read the book to find out more about Renee. But
Renee's worth reading about.
Renee is worth reading about. I got to meet Renee at the book party, and I think you should read this to find out more about Keith and Renee, a great love story. But thank you, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Lori.
you.
Thank you, Lori. That was wonderful. And now it's time to go to our reader questions. But first, before we do, can we just give these two gentlemen a hand? Because this has been fascinating.
How do we do?
Thank you both. So since we announced book club night, people have been signing up. We have people here in the room. We also have people at home who have been watching us and sharing questions. And we had quite a few questions. We can't share them all, but what I tried to do is give a sampling of them, and we heard some things over and over again. So I'm going to ask you some questions that people have been asking. The first question comes from a reader named Joanna Belcher, and she says, our public school charter network has 2 schools in Watts. What do you think schools can do to expose more students to local chefs, the restaurant industry, gardening, and a passion for the culinary arts?
Invite us down. Like, I'll go. I'll participate. Right? I guess just asking, joining up with us. Does that answer?
It does. Well, I also want to mention when you came to see us in the test kitchen, one of the things that struck us, and Lori mentioned it in her story, is the fact that you regularly open up your restaurant every week
Yes.
to people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So right now I work with, so this is good. So the guy that ran the kitchen when I was in prison, named Tobias Tubbs. We call him Shaq in the book. So he was another fella who had a life sentence without parole, who was actually able to overturn his sentence and come home. So now he's home. He started an organization. He goes back to prisons and speak, but he's also working with kids with his wife, Kimmy. And they got this organization called Huma House. And so together, he brings the kids every Wednesday to the restaurant. And these are kids in underserved communities, broken homes, things like that. And we feed them at the restaurant, but we also allow them to come into the kitchen and experience the kitchen and cook the food for each other, right? And we work alongside the kids in preparing a dish for the table for the rest of their group. And that's been going on for about 4 weeks now. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And you didn't have that, I imagine, that when you were at Jordan High School and your other schools, right?
No, we had home economics, but they don't even have that in school no more, right? They got rid of home economics. So, but as far as just asking the chefs or the restaurants to partner, right? I would love to do it. I would love to go back to my community and talk to one of the schools and show them that it can be done. right? Those kids are in the exact same situation I was in, right? So to be that representation of at least one path out would be dope.
Thank you. Quite a few readers wanted to know about your grandmother. They wanted to know more about her. And this one particular question, you covered it, a lot of the things people want to know, you and Daniel talked about, but this is one question you didn't. A reader named Ingrid asks, what was their favorite dish that your grandmother created?
Sakatumi cake.
Sock it to me. What was in that?
It's like a pound cake with pecans and cinnamon and sour cream. Like it's a southern thing. Like you have to try it. Come to Alta, we serve it. But the Sakatumi cake, like I was a fat kid.
Sakatumi cake?
Yeah, I was a
Wow.
fat kid. Like, you know, you want to get me to eat dinner, have a cake at the table. You know, and she kept cake at the table. Another thing that I loved was that when my grandmother took the time to slowly cook neck bones until the meat fell off the bone, pulled the bone out, add the potatoes, and like made homemade beef and potato burritos. Like I loved it. Yeah.
Well, we have a few more food questions. This one comes from Therese Holiday, and she says, what's your favorite go-to for dinner when you're not at your restaurant? And I want to ask this question to Daniel too. Where's your favorite place in LA that you just go to for dinner?
I don't get to go out much. I really don't. Renee takes me to a lot of places. And I just go along for the ride. Post and Beam. I love what Chef Martin is doing there. Yeah.
Daniel, I want to ask you, when you're just not working, obviously a food editor, you're working all the time, but you're just going out for just to hang, relax in LA, what's your go-to spot?
Oh, it's so hard to answer that. I would say definitely Post and Beam is a good option.
Yeah.
I also live in that community, in that area now myself. I like stopping by Earl's on Crenshaw.
Oh yeah, good chili cheese dogs, right?
Really good chili there, vegan chili.
Yeah.
There's a taco guy like 2 blocks down from Alta that's like right in front of an auto body shop. That's
right there.
pretty
Yeah.
bomb. Yeah, downtown Inglewood, there's some interesting places there. There's a place called the Sandwich Shop. It's right there on Regent Street. Pretty excellent also.
I think the
Vegan
last
chili.
week I've probably hit Sonora Town every day.
Okay, great. Yeah.
They just opened Sonora Town on San Vicente and Hauser in Mid-City. And I just go by there every day. So that's what I've been on.
And the same reader, Teresa, also wants to know, are you planning a cookbook?
I need a cookbook. Any word on that?
Definitely would love to do a cookbook. Definitely would love to do a cookbook. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Random House. Definitely would love to do a cookbook.
Okay, so this next question comes from reader Kim Hannell, and she wants to know, how did you manage to keep the faith in life and faith in yourself through all of your struggles?
How did I manage to keep the faith in life and faith in myself through all the struggles? I don't, that's a hard question. That's a really hard question. Because for me, it was just more about surviving, right? It was just more about surviving. Like, I literally was hopeless. Like, I just knew I didn't want to die. So it was surviving. It was just treading that water. It wasn't until my life began to change that I started having faith or believing, right? And it's more so about me just being, I'm gonna continue to say it over and over again, being representation of what can be or what is possible, right? People ask me what is next for me to be that example for somebody. That's all I'm focused on, because I know when I first got my opportunity, I did not treasure it, and I could have blew it because there was no example of what I can accomplish. Like when I got that job at Loco, there's no way on God's green earth that I would have knew that I would own a restaurant, that I would be a chef, that I would be an author, that I would potentially be an executive producer on my own show, or that I will own a damn house in Westwood Hills. There's no way you could have got me to believe that, right? So I tried to quit. So I want to be that encouragement, that example for someone to keep pushing. That's my only purpose.
I see Daniel picking up his microphone. Go ahead, ask the question.
Well, no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it really is about, for you, as you chart again in the book about surviving. But I do think that now, as we reach this point of adulthood and maturity, that we do want to be like examples.
That's it.
And
That's it.
and sort of
I
chart
come from it,
paths.
and I don't care about what accolades, what I accomplished. I'll never forget that, and I'll never forget what they're going through, and I'll never forget what I didn't have and what's needed. And anytime I can be that to them of what they need, that's the only damn mission I'm on, right? There's kids that's in a position I was in that need hope, right? And I'm gonna be that hope for them, period. That's why I won't use drugs again. That's why I won't let nobody trick me out my position, right? There's no way I've opened this door just to peek in. You know what I mean? There's people down there that need someone like me to give them hope. And that's what I'm gonna be.
Well, that's really a good transition to what's going to be our final question of the evening. Comes from Liz Pedroza, and she wants to know, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Being somebody's hope. Seriously, I don't know. None of this was a goal. I didn't have a goal for none of this. There was no small goals to reach this big goal, right? I'm along for the ride. I don't know what's next. I don't know. The only thing I know is in my heart and my soul feel, and that's to stay connected to my people, right? And my people is not about the ghettos or black or brown or white. It's for anybody that need hope, anybody that need an example that they can triumph or overcome or persevere. That's my people, and I'm gonna be there for them, period. It's not about me planning to open 16,000 restaurants, be a millionaire and all that. No, I get my wealth in inspiring people, giving people something to like keep pushing, to be that example that you can get the fuck up out of there, straight up.
Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you, Daniel,
Thank you, Keith.
and thank you, Lori Ochoa. Thank you to the ASU California Center and the amazing team for partnering with us this evening, so we were able to offer this evening free to everyone here in the room and also to all the people watching at home. Thank you to Diesel Bookstore. We always have a local independent bookseller, and I always encourage people, when you buy the book from our monthly author, shop local. Diesel is here tonight, and Keith has agreed to sign books for anyone who would like a copy. And most of all, I want to thank all of our book club readers for joining us month after month, for just your loyalty and all of these wonderful conversations. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, everyone.